apologize, my friend, and I'm grateful for you here, and I'm looking forward to your testimony.
Chairman Booker, Ranking Member Cotton, and members of the subcommittee, my name is Weldon Angelos, and I am the living proof of the benefits of second chances. Thank you for inviting me here today to share my personal experiences with the committee and to discuss the impact of prohibition on the lives of ordinary Americans like myself. Today's topic is critically important and affects the lives of millions of Americans, from those who have interacted with the criminal justice system to patients and veterans who get relief from cannabis. When I was 23 years old, I was working in the music industry as a producer for artists like Snoop Dogg and Tupac Shakur's group. It was my dream job. In addition to my music career, I was also selling small amounts of cannabis on the side to help pay the bills until my music venture stabilized. Unfortunately, my connections to the music industry and to hip-hop in particular made me the perfect target for law enforcement. After selling roughly $300 worth of cannabis to a confidential informant on 3 occasions, I was arrested, tried, convicted on 16 federal counts, the most serious of which included harsh mandatory punishments. The relevant statute, 924C, punished the combination of any amount of cannabis and a lawfully possessed firearm. It didn't matter that the drug was a small amount of cannabis. It didn't matter that the ownership and possession of the firearm was otherwise legal under state law. And it didn't matter that the firearm wasn't brandished or used. In fact, a defendant can be convicted for having cannabis and legal guns in his own home. In my case, all of these problems applied with a vengeance. For me, the result was a mandatory 55-year sentence, a punishment that even the judge who sentenced me called cruel, unjust, and even irrational. In 2016, thanks to the unrelenting advocacy of my family, bipartisan elected officials, and even the man who prosecuted me, I was finally released under President Obama's administration after serving 13 years. In 2020, I was fully pardoned by President Trump. Now that I'm no longer incarcerated, I have dedicated my life to ending cannabis prohibition and mass incarceration. I have worked on these issues with multiple presidential administrations and helped pass the bipartisan First Step Act. I founded the Weldon Project, a nonprofit that works to provide relief to those convicted of cannabis offenses. National cannabis reform must include 1, the release of federal cannabis offenders, 2, a true expungement and sealing of records, and 3, the creation of meaningful opportunities for the formerly incarcerated upon release. With the comprehensive approach to cannabis reform, we could immediately assist the many of the nearly 3,000 people who are serving federal prison time for cannabis, as well as the tens of thousands of individuals whose lives and futures are haunted by records of cannabis arrests, convictions, and sentences. This is why I was excited and grateful to see the Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act introduced last week. This bill would help end the harmful criminal justice impacts of prohibition, all while allowing states the right to decide the direction their jurisdiction will take. Congress must also address the residual effects of cannabis convictions. Those with felony convictions can be politically disenfranchised, losing the right to vote, for instance. They lose other civil liberties as well as lawful opportunities afforded to others in education and public housing. Cannabis convictions adversely impact credit scores, and they also impede or entirely prevent employment, creating permanent barriers to true participation in society. Even with a full presidential pardon, I still feel the stranglehold of my conviction in my home state of Utah. My prior conviction bars me from participating in the state's legal medical cannabis industry. The state refuses to issue licenses to individuals with felony convictions, even with a full presidential pardon. In California, the other state I call home, my criminal history prevents me from accessing credit, capital, and financing, despite having engaged in conduct that is now legal throughout the jurisdiction. As a result, I've been effectively shut out of an entire legal industry that is supposed to be one of the most equitable in the country. Today, however, I'm hopeful because of your consideration of the CAOA. It could be life-changing for individuals incarcerated in the federal prison system for cannabis offenses. Each day, incarceration severely affects the mental and physical health of incarcerated individuals and negatively impacts their relationships with the outside world. And each arrest, prosecution, conviction, and sentence makes the world a little bit smaller for those who must live their lives bearing the modern scarlet letter. I realize I am one of the lucky ones. I am no longer inmate 100538081. I am a reform advocate with the immense pleasure of testifying before you today. But my fortune is not universal. I am reminded of all those I left behind in prison, many of who are people of color who continue to serve time for cannabis while predominantly white CEOs and entrepreneurs make millions from the recreational and medical cannabis industries around the country. The cannabis industry should be able to grow and thrive, but not at the expense of those who are still incarcerated. And as I think about cannabis reform and ensure the release of those who are still serving time in prison, we must also provide opportunities and resources to support reentry and create a pathway to expungement to stop the collateral consequences. I strongly believe we can build on the bipartisan success of the Criminal Justice Reform, the First Step Act, and continue to work to end the racially motivated cannabis policies that have endured for too many decades. Thank you again for including me in this historic hearing. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Angelos. Mr. Cook, I didn't have a chance to